everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 24 of March Comes In Like a Lion, or technically episode 2 of season 2. It's gonna be, I'm not a math major, math's like my worst subject, so it's gonna be you watching Romania struggle with math as she tries to figure out when we get like later on in the season what is what. But I'm super excited because season 2 started out great. Started out wonderful. It was heartfelt. It was hilarious. I had a lot of fun with episode 23, and I honestly could not wait until I can get to episode 24. But luckily, I did have some comments pop up from Patreon and YouTube that I want to talk about. So we have quite a few comments to get through, so please bear with me. This may take a little bit because it's been a while since we've looked at the comments. Am I right? So it is exceedingly hot today. So Romania's put her hair up because it's hot outside, it's sweaty, and that's just the way it has to be. But J. Dunodrum 1403. I really liked the comment they had for episode 19 on YouTube where they were talking about how Ray and Shimada, I totally agree with them and their comment that the creator of March, just the way they flesh out characters and that they make their motivations so layered but so detailed is so well done. And they talked about how Ray kind of built him. It kind of talks about him and Shimada coming from two different places. You have Ray, who's built himself up from this lie that he told himself, as well as those around him combusting, and it's kind of pushed him into the scenario where he's at, and it's caused him to move forward. And then you have Shimada, who has had this loving but also daunting support around him. I love the way that that's phrased, Jay, as well as this idea of ambition with opportunity that pushes him forward as well. So there's these extraneous forces around them that are pushing Ray and Shimada towards their goals from different angles, and it's so well done. Episodes 19 through 22, I was like, like just absolutely beside myself with. So I thought those were really, really good. Alexander Q, I really liked this idea. Alexander Q posited the headcanon of did Shimada and Nikaido, I know they had similar teachers, but did they possibly meet each other at a hospital? Because Shimada has his ulcers and his issue with his stomach, and Nikaido has his issue as well. So did they possibly like meet at a hospital? I kind of would think that would be interesting because it would give a little bit more circumstance to Shimada kind of feeling for Nikaido, because they kind of share, like they have their own health issues they can kind of bond over. But I don't know. I thought that was really cool headcanon. And then Gylfie, I hope I said that right, Gylfie, Gylfie or Gylfie, they recommended me listen to this song called 9 by Sleeping at Last, which was a really, really cool song. It's very slow, very melancholy, and a kind of acoustic melancholy. But some of the lyrics, if you go listen to that song, it's called 9 by Sleeping at Last. I'd never heard it before. They really do kind of apply to Ray, which I thought was really cool. The lyrics that got to me the most from that song was that there was one lyric, a line that said, "Wake up, roll up your sleeves, stand up, fall in love again, wage war on gravity. There's so much worth fighting for." I was like, oh, even though, you know, Ray hasn't said yet that he loves Shogi or not, I thought those lines worked really well. But also the lyric, "It looks like empathy, but I'm just trying to find myself through someone else's eyes." I was like, oh my God, that is Ray. And we've seen that with him and Shimada's relationship, but we've also seen that through him and Kyoko and their relationship. I thought that was so, so good. And then I think my favorite line is, "To know and love ourselves and others well is the most difficult and meaningful work we'll ever do." And I love that. I love the idea that this series focuses on Ray. Not only because Ray is very caring and considerate of others. He really is. He's a selfless person, and that's one of the qualities of Ray that I love the most. But the biggest challenge for someone that's so considerate and kind to others is that Ray still hasn't quite learned to love himself completely. And it's like, you just want him to so badly. And I just, that song was really, really fitting for Ray. So if you get a chance, go listen to it. I think it's really good. And then Shimayama, one of our patrons, I had asked the Discord, I had made kind of in the episode 20, I'd made a witch hat atelier joke about the little hats that they wear with Nikaido and what's his face. I've already forgotten his name. I feel so bad. But I have. But their match against one another, I was like, what's with the hats? What's with the vests that Shimada and Rei wear? And so Shimoyama actually posted a lot of information about it. So I just copied and pasted it because I didn't want to handwrite it all. So I'm going to read it here to you all, talking about, it could be a long story, so spare me for your time. Human shogi is held in Tendo City in the Yamagata Prefecture at first. It's spread widely throughout Japan, but it tends to be held in the spring, especially cherry blossom season. And there was actually car shogi before, which car shogi sounds hilarious. I am all for it. Back in my day, when I was in high school, gas was insanely cheap. At least in the US, it was insanely cheap. And on weekends, my friends and I, because we didn't have cell phone games like y'all do now, and we didn't really have the internet widespread, so we would get a full tank of gas and we'd go play what we called car tag or car hide and go seek. The dorkiest, hillbilliest thing ever. And we basically go through town and hide in places and see if the other person could find us. I know. That's what we did. That's what hillbillies did in the early 2000s. We had nothing to do. We could have been mudding in a ditch, so I guess we should be lucky. But car shogi sounds amazing. I want to see this in action. So please, Discord, send me your car shogi videos. I want to see them. I need to see them. People are separated east and west and dressed as samurai because it originates from the history that Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the regent emperor, was at the top of the samurai and played human shogi with his pages and squires. Interesting. Since samurai is a general term, it contains a lot of layers and different statuses and shogi uses. There's different roles for pieces, kind of like chess. So the role of the main person, they wear simple clothes of the ashigaru, and pro shogi players put on the warlord style clothes as general. Sometimes pro shogi players put full armor on, but mostly they just wear symbols of the general. And the symbols are the hat and the vest. The hat is called tate iboshi. Iboshi is a formal hat for an adult male. Before the Sengoku era, it was a shame to take off the iboshi even in one's home. I'm not a hat person, but luckily I'm not a man, so that would not have applied to me anyway. If people of Heian or Kamakura era were asked, they would have the choice of taking off the eboshi or underwear. Presumably, they would choose the underwear. Interesting. The latter of the Muramochi era, not putting a hat on was normalized, but still eboshi is a formal costume for certain public appearances. That's why generals have to put it on at war. Before the latter part of the Muromachi era, they put eboshi on under kabuto, and in the Sengoku era, warlords directly put on kabuto on at war, but eboshi is still remained as a formal item. And then as far as the vests that Rei and Shimada wear, Shimoyama said, the vest is called a jimbaori, and it's relatively a new item in the Sengoku era. Warlords wear different designs of jimbaori to stand out and to represent their clans or religions like kabuto. Actually, jimbaori are more like a surcoat or a cloak because warlords put them on over their armors. With tate iboshi and jimbaori, pro shogi players transform as generals even though they put on suits. Sometimes pro shogi players who do oban kaisetsu, the explanation on a large broad front in front of the audience as live commentary, they put eboshi and jimbari on to liven up the atmosphere. According to the human shogi rules, generals, pro shogi players, have to move every piece at least once. People hoist the poles which are connected to shogi pieces so the generals can see from the top. Interesting. There's a big part of it on the Discord channel. I'm probably going to go on there after this episode and ask about the car shogi. So maybe by next episode, I'll have some more information for you all about that because that seems absolutely amazing. But yeah, I'm super excited about episode 24. So thank you all so much for the comments, for the kind words, and I hope you all are enjoying the first part of season 2 as much as I am, because I'm really looking forward to it. And we have this match that is Kumakura versus Souya, and we don't exactly know. We know Kumakura won the first match. We don't exactly know who won the second match that just ended last episode, so I'm assuming we're going to find that out, but I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. So we're not going to waste any more time. I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. But we're going to dive in to March Comes In Like a Lion. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Start right into the OP. Of course. I'm going to turn this up on my end. I really like this OP already. Does it? It feels like a mixture between the first and second OP, kind of, which would make sense. Aw. I like the kind of rainbow line work that's around the outlines of Ray. Of course, why is Ray in the rain? Get that boy an umbrella. I'm a sucker for rainbow too. So anytime you include like a rainbow transition or color splotch, I'm like, ah, you've sold me already. Yeah. Uh-huh. So cute. I like the little... I wonder where Hina got the necklace from. Did Ray get her that necklace or someone else get it? It seems like a very obvious piece of jewelry. So I'm curious where it came from. Very curious. Chaos. Wow, that looks like Nikaido from the second OP. This sounds like Thriller. Oh no. Are you being shy, Kiriyama? He's like, God, stop. It's not Ray's fault. Oh no. Oh no, Nikaido. So that we can go up against each other in the finals. Otherwise, we won't have a single match this year together. Oh my god. No, he's like, don't take this tournament so lightly. Ray's like, I'm not underestimating it. Stop. God, Nikaido. That's funny. Ooh. Hello, Smith. Hello, Issa. Are they all evaluating Souya's match? Yes, that's what they're all doing. Look how blushy Issa is. Ooh. I love that everyone in the room is clearly having a different thought about what to possibly do. Oh, yeah. Who you betting on, old man? Neither of them. Ooh, that seems like his nature. The children have entered. Oh my god. Ah! What? The snake and the mongoose. Oh my god. While these people are talking, this is chaos indeed. Oh my god. Ah! It's so noisy. Ooh. Damn! Ray's like, but I didn't do anything! Oh no! Ooh. Sell it with shogi. Ooh. Ooh. Huh? Oh. Don't you be back talking. Don't you be smack talking, Shimada. Don't you dare. Oh, right in front of them? Right in front of them? Smith is like, oh, it's about to get bad. both two bitches. Oh, really? Wow. Okay, Goto. All right. All right. I'll work with that. Good for you for standing up. Damn, the tension in this room is insane. Wow, and then they leave. Man, Goto with the old man. They did. Yeah, this has just got so tense. Well, that makes sense for him. Ah. That's just how it is. Ooh, this old man is interesting. Poor Shimada by himself. We talked about that in season 1, yeah, and reconstructing ourselves from the shattered pieces. Damn. Wow, and Ray listening to that. Players who've experienced it, of course. Ooh. Oh. Okay. Meh. Slashing like a knife itself. Wow. Oh my god. Very touchy. Yes, indeed. Excuse us! We're gonna leave! We haven't been in a title match at all! I was gonna be like Kevin Smith and them. You don't listen, do you? No. And Ray's just sitting there having to watch this. Yep. Yep. Uh-huh. And you're in that room with him right now. And he's not even acknowledged your presence, sir. After everything. Yeah, oh! Oh! Oh. Oh. Ooh. 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 Shit. Humans are the embodiment of chaos. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do now? Yes, they're one and the same. Mm-hmm. What do you do? Uh-huh. You can, if you want to. or try to figure out him. Wow, that background just changed. Does he know you're lying? Oh, and it's against him. Did he also say that to be like, don't go messing around with her? Oh, bitch. Oh. Oh. Wow. Oh my God, the air leaving this room. He didn't react to him saying Coda, though, which is interesting to me. Wow, in March, and it's already May. God, that's hard. God. Oh. What are we talking about, though? Chaos. Holy shit! Okay. Oh. Oh. God. Oh. Well, so this is going to decide the winner, so they're tied. So it's 3-3. Oh. For the 4th time in a row. Wow. So the last 4 years he's faced him. But Souya's always won. Interesting. Oh, yeah, Suji. What's the reason? I love that they can't figure out why he did it. Like, what was the reason behind him moving it to that position? Oh, of course he's gonna have a reason. What? Do you? Ah! Are you jinxing him, sir? Are you jinxing? Do you reckon? Oh. He resigned. He just knew he lost. How did he know? How did he know he was going to lose? do you know that fast? Yeah, why? Well, so did Suji. At the 17th move? Oh, Souya. So they're trying to see if there's a way out of it? To see if they can beat what Kumakura had gotten into? And it just kept cornering him, didn't it? Oh my gosh! Yeah. There was nowhere to go. He noticed immediately that he was trapped. Well, that's terrifying! He saw something nobody else saw. Brilliant. He trapped him like that. Wow. In 17 moves. Damn. All that work. Ace is like, he's so cool. Yes, yes. Right? I mean, he looks pretty sad, to be honest. I mean, and for it to end, they're like, he's so cool. But honestly, Souya, I mean, you have to be that confident to get to that point too, but I think Souya just got lucky and landed in the right spot and knew what to do. Is that for his wife? Ah. Hmm. That's pushing. That's pushing it. Hmm. 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 I mean, he got her to get the stuff for his wife. It's like Lancome, like making fun of that brand. Oh, she's gorgeous. Masako, she's beautiful. Hmm. Hmm. Did you? Uh-huh. Uh. Uh. Good. Good, go home. Just leave the clothes there. Nobody's gonna take them, apparently. She's gonna sneak in as soon as you open that door up. Yep. 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 Fool. Fool. Yes, go home, girl. Go home. Go home. Ha! I would have made her go home. Hmm. They deserve each other, honestly. At this point. Oh my god! Did he punch the wall? Oh my god! Holy shit! Yeah, that's not funny! Well, yeah, he was pissed. Because he lost. Yeah, I'd make him pay for it, obviously. Oh my god, I don't blame you, Chairman. I don't blame you. I mean, he was pretty pissed. He held his composure well. Oh, Kuma. Him and his anger issues. Obviously, it would have been frustrating. For a man that intense. It couldn't have been anything other than frustrating. The 4th year in a row, and you lost again. Holy shit! Well, that was, an episode to say the least. Chaos and Kumakura. I really want to see Goto versus Kota. Unless that whole Kota thing was just the older man being like, don't piss off Kota by messing around with his daughter. That's what it seemed like. It seemed like the old man could read what he was doing, and he was like, I know what you're doing. You're not talking to your comatose wife on the phone, so who you talking to? I like that it seems for some of the elder men behind closed doors, they know what's going on, or some of them do, and it's not their business to say whether it's right or wrong, but they're like, be careful. Don't make Kota upset that you're hanging around his daughter. Even though she's 22, she's old enough to make her own choices. Still. Wow. Oh my gosh. Holy cow. Well, y'all wanted Whiteboard Coon back, so... The funny thing is, I was trying to figure out, well, who won the second match in last episode? Was it Kumakura, or was it Souya? And the answer is, it didn't matter. Because we were going to find out the results of the entire tournament in this episode. So, oh my gosh, wow. There's a lot to break down in this episode. I'm so excited about that. But Wow, this series just continues to impress me, where it gives you characters that you think you know. You think you have them figured out, you think you have their character, and then the show goes, well, just like humans in real life, no, you don't have them figured out. And people are infinitely layered and complex. And one thing I love about this series is that it delves and it like peels back the layers. Like it's like breaking open a scab and peeling back the skin layer by layer to see what's behind and what makes these people function. And there's parts of people that you just can't figure out. It's chaos. And that's the whole episode, Chaos and Kumakura. That's the episode. It's just you cannot figure out people. They are too complex to fully understand. Even fictional characters, right? And there are parts about this episode and the characters that I can genuinely relate to, and I was really getting like emotionally like caught up in, and I was like, oh my gosh. But and the thing about it is it kind of depends on you as a person, like what can you stand, what can you not stand. And the good news is that there are so many people in this world and so many different relationships we develop interpersonally and with others that it's okay. But there were parts of this episode I was like, man, that's really hitting home pretty hard. So let's talk about this episode. I want to make note that when we first start out with Nikaido freaking out because him and Rei are possibly not going to have a match against each other this year, I do feel bad for Nikaido, because Nikaido, he loves that Rei is his arch nemesis. They're like, we're rivals, we're besties, we're going to compete. It would basically be like a tournament happening and Goku and Vegeta couldn't face each other in Dragon Ball Z. That's what it feels like, or at least that's how I feel Nikaido feels in this scenario. So Nikaido's like, well, during our rank-defining matches, we're not facing each other. We didn't get the lottery. We're not going to face each other to determine who's going up to B rank and who's not. Which is sad, right? I feel for Nikaido because he lives to play with Rei, right? So instead he's like, well, if that can't be the case, then what's going to happen is we'll have to face each other in the newcomer battle, which I guess is younger players or newer players to shogi who are rising up the ranks. The only problem is they're both in two different blocks. He's in block A and Rei's in block B, or vice versa. The only way they'll be able to even face each other once this entire year is if they make it to the finals of the newcomer battle and face off against each other. So that is one of the goals that supposedly is happening. And I like the fact that when we first come in on Nikaido and it's like all red around him, it looks like the OP from last season, OP2, where you see Issa and Smith and then you turn around, there's Nikaido facing each other. Now we see the backside of him. So I thought that was a clever thing for Shaft to do. And he's like, I've clawed my way up to the C1 ranking, same as you, because I was driven by desperate thoughts that we'd play against each other, and now we're not playing against each other. And so that's kind of one of the fun things about shogi in this world, is that there is the concept, and I'm going to kind of put it out here to the side. The idea with shogi is that it is basically you're battling for your rank, of course, but you're also battling to face your rivals, and you're battling for yourself, right? I mean, whether it's financial reasons or personal reasons or health reasons, mentally or physically, whatever the case may be. And so it's one of those things we kind of talk about in this episode, is that these characters, they're bracing themselves and training themselves to get to certain checkpoints. Like Kumakura's like, well, this was the 4th time I've made it to Souya against him in the final round, and he's beaten me. So I'm just going to start back over at square one and work my way back. And at first I thought he handled it really calmly. I was like, wow, he handled that really, really correctly. And then we see he kicked a hole in the wall because he was so pissed off. And the chairman, we'll talk about that whole scene later, but understandable? Not exactly. The title of this episode should have been understandable, but maybe not justifiable. That should have been the episode title. I think that works for a lot of scenarios in this episode, but we'll break it down even further. But I feel for Nikaido. I do feel for him. He just wants to play Rei, and now he's like, doesn't possibly have the chance of that happening. And he's like, Kiriyama, I swear to you, if you don't make it to the final round, I love that Nikaido's just losing his mind. He's just going on this big rant, and Rei's over here like, I know. Ray's like, oh God, I knew you were going to react this way. And my favorite part of this whole rant is that Nikaido is like, are you taking this seriously, Kiriyama? He's like, we had more matches back together at school together. But my favorite part of this is that he's like, don't just think because it's a newcomers battle that you can just waltz in here and get to the finals. It's not going to be that easy. I love that Nikaido thinks he's already figured out Ray's psychology, and he already knows that Ray may think he has this in the bag, or that he's not taking it seriously enough, or that's what he assumes. And he's like, Ray, you have to take this seriously so that we can get the final together. I love him getting so excited about it. And he's just following Ray being like, don't think this is going to be easy. And he's like, let me tell you. And he's trying to he's just doing circles around him, being like, don't underestimate it. And Ray's like, I'm not underestimating it. And then, so they have the Katsura room. Katsura. Put Katsura on here. I'm assuming that's the old man in the Katsura room. They gave his name. I want to put it down here in just a second. But they're all watching on TVs or laptops. This is 2008, so it's funny the laptop that they're watching the match on. I literally had that laptop, I think, in 2008, which is hilarious to me. But any chance I get to see Issa and Smith together, I'm all excited. Smith is one of my favorites. I love him. Even when he's not doing anything, he's just such a visually arresting character. But this old man, he is fascinating. And I want to talk about him because he's kind of one of my new favorites. I like him a lot. He's interesting. And then we have these two randos that are just in the room. We obviously have the observers taking notes, but then we have these two random guys that are just there being jerks, right? They're like the foil to Smith and Issa's wholesomeness. So the old man with his green tea, they're like, Kumakura, 9th Dan, pawn, 2-7. I love the concept that when they're observing the games, they're also like making the moves on the board, and they're trying to, as the game is going on, figure out what moves they're going to make and what possibilities are on the table. I love that with shogi. One thing I love about this game is that every game is also an opportunity for the audience to learn and to pick apart and improve their own skills. So it's a very engaging and you wouldn't expect that, right? When you think of shogi, you think of, oh, I'm just like watching paint dry, but that's not the case at all. And it's very interactive, which is not something I anticipated going into this series to see with shogi. But they're like, what is Souya doing? I feel like they're all trying to crack the code of Souya and Kumakura's like mindset and what they think about this, right? I think that's so fascinating. Kisho Yanagihara. Okay, so that's not his name. Katsura is just the name of the room that they're in. Okay, no. So we're gonna talk about character, right? We're gonna talk about character pros versus cons, right? I feel like we've talked about Ray enough, so we don't have to include Ray on this, but I want to talk about mainly Kisho. Kisho, the old man, Yanagihara. He is the older gentleman that's a shogi master that's here. He's technically the most skilled in the room. Then we have Goto. He's on there. And then we're going to put Shimada over here. Yep, we're going to put Shimada over there. And so we have our three main guys. Ray, I feel like we talk about Ray every episode, but those three are the ones I kind of want to focus on. And so they're, of course, like, well, at this current point, do you support Meijin Souya or Kumakura for the ninth Dan this? I like that basically they call him Lion King Souya or Meijin Souya, all these titles that Souya has won and is defending. It's fascinating to me, right? I feel like for Souya, that adds to the layer of his character that he has all this pressure on him constantly, and he constantly is just defending his title. He's made it to the top of the ladder, and he's just constantly defending it from falling. But I like that Kisho says he doesn't want to support either of them. So he's just like, I don't support either of them. He's like, why should I? I think that he's such a grump, but he's like a wise grump, right? So then Ray comes in. Ray is being perfectly calm, cool, and collected, and Issa's looking up at him, and then Nikaido is just being grumpy coming in. And I like that Kisho kind of looks over at him like, kids, we're in the middle of a serious match here, and y'all are being loud. But it's that fire stoked, right? And the drums bang. I also like the idea of behind Ray and Nikaido is a snake and a mongoose. which seems so interesting, the snake and the mongoose. But side reference, usually mongoose eat snakes. So that's putting Nikaido in kind of the more favorable position in this moment, which is fascinating to me that the mangaka would do that. And they're like, if I had to sum it up, it would be chaos. And Nikaido's like, well, I'd say you're both arrogant and pompous. I'm like, why are you talking about him like that? Why? He's like, I don't know which of them is superior. I love that while there is the chaos of this moment, the chaos of Rei and Nikaido going back and forth at each other, then Kisho is like, yeah, I would describe this whole match with Souya and Kumakura as chaotic, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And they're both very seasoned professionals that don't exactly play in a way that's easy to discern or easy to predict, right? But this whole episode was just chaos. It very much lived up to its name, right? And he's like, where'd you get that from? He's like, well, from everything. The prodigy who turned professional in middle school, destined to become Meijin, or the master. And they're like, well, we need something, a headline for the internet. So the two guys talking to Kisho are reporters, right? And it's just, they're like, well, how about the Meijin Battle's final game is a close contest? I love that Kisho is very direct. We need to put this on here. He's very direct. He's direct and or blunt. There is not much beating around the bush. I feel like the chairman is very much the schmoozer, right? The chairman is our social butterfly. He is our persona, our face of the people. He's like, everyone, isn't Shogi wonderful? Haha. Even when we've seen him be a little bit serious. And of course, we're going to talk about the whole hole in the wall moment. But he very much has to, because he's the chairman, he's the face of the industry. He has to be sociable. He has to be fun. He has to be friendly. He has to put on a good face for the audience and the people watching and the people in the association that are members. Kisho don't give a shit. He's just like, you just call it a close match. What do you want from me? He doesn't have to put on airs, which is great. And so Nikaido's like, you've been relying on that reputation. And Rei's like, do you even know me? And they're like, but Mr. Yanagihara. And he's just like, look. He's like, it's so noisy. Issa, Smith, throw those two out. I love it. I love that he's just like, throw them out if they're going to be too loud. He's just blunt. He's like, no. And he's also very authoritative, right? In that moment, and not authoritative in a bad way. He just is very direct. Like, you guys are you're being noisy. This is a match. Shut up or leave. We don't sugarcoat in the Yanagihara household, apparently. Yep, throw him out. And he's like, at once. Smith's like, we'll do whatever you say, sir. And Rei's like, I didn't do anything. And so then the reporters are leaving and they head out. And they're both like, we don't want to go yet. And so they just get stuck in the corner. He's like, that's what I hate about youngsters. They won't leave. They decide to shut up so that they'll stay there. And he's like, fine. Don't use words to fight. Settle it with shogi. Ooh, I love it. So, no fighting with words. Settle with shogi. Which is a very big distinction from Goto. Very big distinction from Goto. In other words, what this tells me about no fighting with words is controlling one's anger. Controlling one's anger and a form of maturity. Because, yeah, I think that there is a big maturity to Kisho, where he's like, look, quit yelling at each other, settle it on the board, and do it that way. And then that's what this game is about. It's a form of war. It's a form of war that's not violent. You settle it this way. Quit yelling at each other. Be respectful. Have dignity. It's like, oh! And he's a master shogi, so he kind of earns the right to say that, right? He is a grump, for sure. And he's like, Souya moved his rook to 3-7. And so as they're sitting there, and so then these two posers that they don't get names because they're not worthy of getting names. That's kind of the point. They're just there watching as well, right? These two guys. And they're like, well, it's nice to see some enthusiasm, don't you think? Like, I wish they would share a little with their mentor. Oh, you mean Mr. Shimada. So they're talking about Rei and Nikaido getting all fired up at each other when they first came in. And the two of these two guys talking smack. I was like, who are you? If you want to talk about about maturity, immature versus mature, these guys are clearly adults. Nikaido and Rei are teenagers, and these two guys seem like they're clearly adults, or at least in their 20s. And I'm like, it was not any of your business what Nikaido and Rei were doing. They stopped arguing with one another. The case was closed. Kisho kind of shut it down. We moved on. Where Rei, the moment that Kisho was like, oh, look, Souya made his move. That was the social etiquette of him saying, okay, the kids shut up. I said my piece. We're good now. Now let's focus back on the match. And it was over. The issue, the drama was done. We were done. We didn't have to carry it on anymore. But these two guys are being complete jerks. They're not letting it go. And they want to have the last word. And then they bring up Shimada. And I was like, Rei and Nikaido, I was like, excuse me? And it was one thing, they're like, well, he's been lacking ambition. And that one guy where his eyes move over to look at Nikaido and Rei, they were clearly saying this out loud to incite Rei and Nikaido to get them to act up. Maybe to get them ejected from the room. I don't know. Maybe they were jealous that they were allowed to be there when they were kids. I don't know. But there was no reason for them to bring Shimada up. And then they're like, oh, like, what happened to him? And they're like, oh, in the Kisho tournament qualifiers. Oh, the Kisho tournament qualifiers. Oh, so Yanagihara, Kisho, is Kisho his actual name or is that his title? Kind of like Meijin Souya. Maybe I should call him Yanagihara. Maybe I should do that instead. Like, he kept making moves that were unusual for him. Maybe Souya sucked the soul out of him. And Rei and Nikaido are both like, who are these guys? Why are they talking so ill of Shimada? Like, that's not cool. What are y'all doing? Like, and they both don't want to say anything because they don't want to get yelled at. But it's like insulting their teacher in front of them is such a lowbrow move. And, you know, Issa and Smith and Kisho don't really say anything. And they're like, and Smith starts to notice that maybe it's going too far. And he's like, But when they said it looks like his shadow has become even lighter and his shadow's not the only thing that's been thinning out, I was like, whoa, now we're not even talking about him as a shogi player. You're talking about him personally and his personal health. Like, that is taking it a step too far and you need to stop because that's not cool. So that's like none of your business. That's mean. What are you doing? And Smith looks like he's about to say something and Kisho doesn't say a word. Kisho lets it go. Kisho's like, I feel like Kisho is testing the room to see, are the two young men going to be able to keep their calm and do like he said and save it for the shogi board and not the room? But that's a really hard move to play when clearly these two guys are insulting their teacher. Like, you know, you could have at least looked up to him and like, hey, shut up. Like, did I not just say that we were done here? And they're like, well, calm down a little. And the two of them are about to say something, and that's when Goto enters the room and shuts it down immediately. Immediately. And he's like, well, guys who never get close to a title match are so happy-go-lucky. And Goto, he shuts down the bad talk against Shimada, which I think it is important to note that Shimada has beat Goto. Now, would Goto have defended Shimada's honor so much if Shimada had lost to him? I think he still would have, but who knows? Who knows? I think he still would have, but who knows? But maybe not because of what happens here. He's like, well, you guys never even had a title match, so why are you talking about Shimada? And they both instantly shut down, and Rei's like, oh. And then so he steps into the room, and he's like, instead of worrying about another player's mental health, you should worry about your own life and the possibility that it could end without ever being in a title match. He just shuts it down, right? So I feel like with Goto, it is respect that is earned. And I feel like Kisho and Goto are maybe similar in that regard, that you earn respect. But I don't know, because Yanagihara, for example, I don't know how he views respect, because I don't know, he seems, we don't know that much about what his views on respecting people in the shogi field are. I feel like his respect is more delineated towards like, do you follow the rules? Do you respect the craft of shogi? Do you respect the practice of it and what it represents? Whereas with Goto, it seems like you have to earn your respect. And Shimada, because Shimada has beat Goto, has earned that respect. So he stood up for Shimada, possibly. Stood up for because he beat Goto. Now, if Shimada had not beat Goto, would he have stood up for him? That's a big what if. That's a Schrodinger's cat. We may never know, right? But he definitely seems to be like, well, you've not earned the right to say that, so you need to shut up. And I'll give Goto respect for standing up to Shimada. I will. I think that that was a good move on his part. Somebody had to say it. Nobody else in the room was saying it. Good for him. And then... But then Yanagihara says, well, that's a little harsh. He says, that's a bit harsh. And what else did he say? He says, and then he moves on to the next movie. He's like, okay, now we're dropping the subject. We're moving back to the match. So the respect is earned with him. He does make the comment that it's a little harsh, that maybe saying that they don't have a right to speak when they haven't earned it is a little bit harsh. So I don't know if Yanagihara believes the same thing as Goto. They might be a little bit different in that regard. They're definitely different in a couple other regards, but we'll get to that. And so then, like, but the mood, oh my God, the mood. Like, also, Yanagihara is a little bit passive aggressive. And that's weird to say because he's very direct and blunt. But what I mean is he's passive aggressive towards tension. When it's something that concerns him, like, oh, this room is noisy. Oh, you guys aren't being respectful. Oh, you're doing this. When it's something that seems to affect him, he's very blunt and direct about it. But when it's something that's affecting other people in the room, he's a little bit more passive aggressive. Like when the guys are being jerks and talking out against Shimada, being like, you know, Yanagihara was like, well, it's not my business, so I'm not going to say anything. Let's just, anytime, like that whole thing of, oh, look, he's moved. Let's not talk about it anymore. That's a bit passive aggressive. And I'm like, okay. Like that establishes more with his character and how he functions. And it's just, nobody has really anything to say about it. And he says, this is also a good move. Like he just instantly changes the subject. We're not going to focus. And that's when those other two guys leave. And see that look when he looks down at the board when the other guys leave, they can't handle the tension in the room. That it just, he's like, good. He's like, fine, we can see who can stand the heat, who can stay in the kitchen, and who has to leave. And I really like the way that Goto is animated looking down at Yanagihara. That he looks really good there. And he's like, see, they left. If you just leave it alone, they'll leave. And he's like, who cares? They probably just went to the toilet. And Issa and Smith are both like, he's like, well, what are you going to do about this mood? You've made it all awkward. Now what are you going to do? Like, again, he's so direct and blunt. He's just like looking up at Goto being like, you've made this awkward. What you going to do about it? Just insane, right? And he's like, it's colder than ice in here now. Jeez. And I feel like Ray's like, what do I do in this moment? He's like, everyone who's gotten their butts kicked in a title match will always lose their composure for a bit. I feel that's why Yanagihara is not as upset about Kumakura as the chairman is, because he believes the value of loss. What's interesting is he seems very forgiving of Kumakura's reaction, where he's like, no. He's like, there's so much tension with it. It's of course, which is so funny because he gets so, when the kids, when Nikaido and Ray come in, he's so like, you guys are being too noisy, even though they're being so passionate. But then later in the same breath, he's like, well, I can understand why somebody in a title match is really passionate. So I can see why they get angry. I'm like, so in that way, it's like you have to almost, just like how Goto says respect has to be earned. It's like Yanagihara is like, well, your emotional outbursts have to be earned as well. He says a title match. He doesn't just say any match. It's specifically a title match. He's like, that's just the way that it is. It's like, ooh. So the match is carrying on, and then we see Shimada. He's like, at this rate, I'll just lose. That's what they come to realize in between matches of a series. They have to break themselves apart and reconstruct it from the shattered pieces. And that line, having Rei, they start over from square one. He's like, it's the same for everyone. And I love that Rei gets to hear him say that, because we've heard Rei talking about that to himself in season 1, but he's never really heard someone just come out and say it so directly as Yanagihara. But then he does. He's like, you just have to pick up the pieces and start all over. That's all you can do, or give up. Those are your options. So yeah, it sucks to start back from square one. Of course you would be emotional to build up to the top of the ladder and then fall down to the bottom. It's like, oh. And they're just all kind of in awe at him. He's like, well, by everyone, I mean players who've experienced that. So again, when you talk about you have to earn that loss. You have to earn that breakdown, right? He's like, if you just lose one match and you give up, then you didn't really earn that frustration. But if you made it all the way to the top of the ladder and fell, well, then of course, who wouldn't feel that loss? And then Goto says, I'm sure if you leave Shimada alone, he'll just start winning again. So it almost sounds like Goto is a little bit envious of Shimada's tenacity. What's so fascinating is Goto cannot possibly know Shimada's backstory like we, the audience, do, and what all he's gone through, but he can understand that Shimada is someone that has this sense of perseverance. He just keeps building himself up, and that equals Shimada having this strength, right? That he has this strength to him, that he's able to move forward. He has this strong will. Even if his body is not strong, his will is strong. And as we come to find out from Goto, he's kind of a weak man in a lot of ways. Maybe not in the realm of shogi, but with all the other things around his life, he's pretty weak. And that's such an interesting angle to look into with his character in this episode. And he's like, that, it disgusts me about Shimada to see people heckling others when they haven't even climbed into the ring. Again, he's like, you have to earn your respect, and you have to know and experience the battle in order to talk smack. That's Goto's kind of reasoning with it, right? Which would make sense why he doesn't believe Rei's earned that right to talk, because he's like, you're just a kid, and you haven't been fighting this battle as long as we have, so you don't get a right to talk. Which, you can think that's bad or good, that's just what Goto seems to believe, right? And Yanagihara is like, you're slashing up everything like a knife itself. So, Yanagihara seems to be of this calm, stone-like presence. He seems very much like a calm stone, right? He's just like, this is the way it is. He's blunt. He's like a stone. He's blunt. This is what it is. It's face value. What you see is what you get, and we're good. But Goto is like a knife slashing. And he's very emotional, right? Very emotional, like we've talked before, like a black ocean torrent, right? Just raging. And he's chaotic. So yeah, he's like, you're always touchy. What are you, a middle school student? Yeah, that is something about Goto as well. He compares him to a middle school student, which, compares that kind of talks and about being touchy, and also about being immature in that regard. And that is what connects him to being a weak person, right? Shimada has a lot of fortitude. Goto does not seem to have a lot of fortitude in some areas. He's like, act like an adult already. I feel like that whole act like an adult already could also be linked to some other things, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But poor Smith and poor Issa, they're both like, okay, we know that we haven't actually won any title matches. So we can't really talk. We don't have any right to be here. They're just so self-aware too. And then Rei and Nikaido are like, well, we're young, so of course we've not been in title matches. And then Goto's like, well, how much time is left? Is this Souya's side? Something that's interesting about Goto and about Yanagihara is that they both seem a little bit at odds with one another, but then Goto, he doesn't even acknowledge Ray's in the room, which is boggling to me. I think because he doesn't want things to escalate, right? To get out of hand. And he's kind of seeing if Ray is going to be able to act like an adult in the room. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But he instantly, even if he doesn't agree with Yanagihara, he respects him. Again, respect being earned for Goto. Goto's like, well, you're a master at shogi. You've earned my respect. So let's just focus on the match. And Yanagihara's like, you don't listen, do you? But okay. But then he gets kind of passive aggressive and he's like, fine, we'll just let it go. He's like, we'll just get back to the game, I guess. And just ignore that everything tense in this room exists. And that's when we cut to Ray. And Ray's like, so is this guy gonna say anything? And then we go back to the moment he got punched in the face. That he got the bloody nose. And we go back to that moment in the past with his foster sister, with Kyoko. And her being like, what should I do? And her being scared. And here's the thing with Kyoko, right? Is Kyoko being over here. This is kind of, again, my problem with Kyoko a little bit, right? Because we've gotten to know her a little bit. But here's my problem with her. She talks to Ray about being scared. About how she loves Goto. But she's scared because she doesn't know what to do about this love. And the simplest solution would be stay away from him. That solves the whole problem. Is if you just leave him alone and stay away from him, you won't have this problem. Every time we've seen her approach Goto, she's been the one to approach Goto. She texts him. She approaches him. She offers to get him the goods for his wife from the store, the facial cream and the stuff, because he's allergic to the smells. We'll talk about that scene in a little bit. She shows up and, I mean, she gets his laundry for him, his dry cleaning. She could have left it down with the apartment attendant or something. I'm sure they have a foyer there when you go into the apartment, or the landlord has an office space. She could have left the dry cleaning down with them, texted and been like, hey, your dry cleaning's there, I did it for you. But she sits by his door and waits for him, and then he tells her to go get in a taxi. He tells her to leave, and she pushes herself in the door into his room. And I'm like, girl, you are your own problem. You are your own worst enemy. If you're scared, stay the hell away from him. She's the one doing this to herself. And so I don't feel bad for her because she's responsible for her own problems. And I do feel bad for her in one regard, and we'll get to that. But she is her own worst enemy. And I'm like, girl, you have got to take some responsibility, and you've got to figure this out. And I'm glad Ray is trying to help her. And we'll talk about Goto's involvement in all this. But when we have this flashback of her and Ray, I'm like, girl, I want to feel bad for you. But then when you're entering his room in his home, when he tells you to go away, I don't feel bad for you anymore because he literally told you to leave. He said he'd walk you to a taxi. What are you doing? I'm like, my sense of pity goes out the window when you do this to yourself. And the guy's actively telling you to leave, and you don't do it. So she says she's scared, trying to manipulate Ray, and then and here's the thing, her saying that she's scared about Goto, it puts Ray into this position where he worries about her because he thinks that maybe, I mean, if your sister came up to you and said, I'm scared of this older man, but I love him, and then you see them out together and she's told you she's scared of him, I would assume that he's hurting her. And I would confront him about it. And that seems to be what happened with Ray and them. And so I'm like, okay, girl, did you get Ray involved and get him hurt because you were being a drama queen? Like, you know, it just, because you wanted to start shit? Like, just, because he ends up getting punched. And we see the blood. We see his glasses come off. And Ray is like, stay away from my sister. And so Ray told him to stay away. and Goto, who punched him. And again, and we saw from the before where he smiled down at Rei and then he stopped smiling. And Rei's like, well, you're married. What are you thinking? Now, when Rei said that, Rei did not know the situation of what was really going on. Obviously, Kyoko has a responsibility for that. She should have been transparent. She could have been transparent. She could have said, hey, his wife's in a coma in a hospital. He can't go and get her stuff. I'm helping him get things. That's why I'm doing it. And Rei's even asked her after the fact, after all this went down, Rei even asked her when she was at his hotel, he's like, why are you with him? And she in that moment could have said, oh, well, I'm helping him because he can't take care of his wife properly. And I'm helping him and I feel bad for him. And I'm doing this and I love him and this is what I'm doing. And if she had given more context to the situation, I think Rei would have a different view of the entire ordeal. But she didn't. She didn't give that context. And so, and then here, when he's like, well, you married, what are you thinking? Kyoko doesn't say a damn thing. And she seems to egg it on. And in Goto's mind, Goto's like, who are you, punk, to question about me and my personal life and what I'm doing? What your sister does isn't any of your business. So why are you coming at me? So I can get why Goto was pissed in that moment, especially when we find out later on, we'll talk about him with the hospital scene. He shouldn't have punched Rei. We don't know if Rei came after him. We don't get to see that far into this flashback. He shouldn't have punched Rei. He shouldn't have hit a kid. He shouldn't have used violence in this scenario because I don't think it was necessary. We don't know if Rei came at him or not. We don't know. But I don't think he should have punched him. That's just me. I don't think it was needed. And then he gets physical with him because Goto has a bad temper. And Rei says people who can't cherish their family are trash. So, because of Rei's words, Kyoko probably thinks that she's trash. At least in Rei's mind. Now, there's lots of things she could do about that in her relationship with Rei, but she don't do a damn thing. So we're left with that. But obviously, Goto, who is a man that prides himself, here's the thing. Goto's life seems pretty chaotic. It seems like chaos. And when your life is chaos, one thing that you try to do is maintain control of it. And so obviously Goto is trying, in the midst of the chaos around his personal life, to have some semblance of control. And whether or not that's successful, we kind of see a glimpse of it here. But that does explain why he had such a visceral reaction. Now, was it correct what he did? I don't think so. Again, but then Yanagihara kind of points out, he's like, you're not acting like an adult. You're acting like a kid. And that is part of Goto's personality. He is immature in some social aspects because he punches him again. And he's like, oh, am I unforgivable and am I trash? Which, again, goes back to the fact that I think Goto realizes that the way he is acting is that of a weak man. He's like, I know I'm doing something I'm not supposed to. He's like, I know I'm with this girl that while my wife's in a coma, I'm messing around with this girl that's half my age and it's wrong. But he's like, it's not your business. You're not God. You shouldn't be judging me. And it's like, he's like, who are you? Who made you God to judge me? What are you? He says, who are you? And he's like, what business is it of yours? And he's like, this is good. This is bad. Are you the one who decides it all? And he's like, I see. And then that's the thing. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, humans are the embodiment of chaos. Yep. So, yeah. And Rei's kind of going through it in this moment, being like, well, what do I do? He's like, the person who got mad on Mr. Shimada's behalf and stood up for him is also the person who makes my older sister suffer, and they're living in the same body. I'm like, but is your older sister suffering? She's a piece of work. I'm like, again, I don't feel bad for Kyoko because she forces it on herself. And I'm like, girl. And then she tries to make Ray feel bad for her. And I'm like, Ray, if you saw half the shit she was doing, you probably wouldn't feel so bad for her. You'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Stop. But I definitely understand now where Goto was coming from in terms of why he got mad at Ray. He's like, you don't get to judge me in what I do. You're not God. You don't get to stand here and judge me. He's like, you're not even her biological brother. You're not blood. Now, if it had been Coda coming up to him being like, you're with my daughter, might have been a little bit different, a different scenario. But he's like, you don't get the right to judge me because you don't even know. He's like, just basically like Coco Montrese from Drag Race. You don't even know me that way. And it's like, I don't think that Goto handled it appropriately. I don't think he should have punched Ray at all. But I do get where he's coming from. I understand what his reasoning is of why he was mad at Ray. And the thing about it is, what I wanted to get at earlier, when Ray's in this moment being like, I'm here with this man that literally punched me twice, and we're in this room, nobody's acknowledging it, is because, one, I mean, at this point, what are they going to do, right? It's a done deal. It's over. It's been how long now? Are you going to go back to it? And two, it kind of draws on this idea that once you are an adult, you are often going to be placed in rooms professionally with people you don't like, and you have to deal with it and figure out something to do. I know from my work, I work with people that I do not like. There are people that I, within 5 minutes of working with them, I'm like, oh, we don't gel. I'm like, we do not gel together. Our personalities are not Cinco Compatigo. We're like, oh no, this is not going to work. But you can't yell at them. And you can't sit there and call them out on stuff that's not really my business. So if I don't like somebody, it's not really my business to judge them. And I have to work with them professionally. I don't have to go hang out with them and be besties with them. But, you know, you have to find a way in a professional environment to sometimes work with people you don't care for. And this is, shogi for them is a professional environment. So it's kind of this growing up moment for Ray of being like, I'm seeing the complicated layers of this human being, and now I'm getting into a space with them where I have to coexist with them, and even if I don't like them, I have to find a way to deal with that on a professional adult level. And that's so powerful in this episode. It's crazy, right? He's like, well, how should I deal with this? And then Smith is like, oh, he made a move. Like, just again, people just breaking the subject. Like, he promoted his pawn. What did he do that for? And then it shows Goto trying to explain what the moves are going to be. And Ray's like, should I hate him? And at first I was like, well, you can if you want to. Nobody says you have to love everybody. But then he says, or should I? And I feel like the other solution was, should I try to understand him? Should I hate him or not? And I you know, from work that I've done as a mediator, one of the big things we talk about with mediation, especially when you're faced with someone that has caused you physical or psychological harm, is one of the big things is you don't have to forgive someone, but you can work to get to an understanding of them. And that's a big step in mediation, because a lot of people believe that you have to, you know, to forgive is divine. You have to forgive somebody. And it's like, you know, that's great if you can. But depending on what that person did to you or did to someone you love, you may not be able to. And that's okay. You don't have to. But it is a big part of progressing as a person and moving on is letting go of hatred. And so if you can at least understand them, you may not forgive them, you may not want to be around them, you may not go hang out with them and be like, hey, we're chums, but letting go of that hatred is a big relief and a big weight off your shoulder. And so that's one thing we encourage in mediation for people to do, is at least come to a way to see each other face to face and understand where each other is coming from. And whether you're able to forgive or move on or interact with them after that is not the mediator's business at that point. And Ray seems to kind of be in that position where he's like, do I at least acknowledge Goto and understand, try to understand him, or do I just hate him and cut him off completely? And that's a choice. You can make that choice. That's up to you. But Ray, being the kind, selfless person that he is, seems like he won't. So then Goto gets the text message. Goto gets the text. And the way he looks at it, it's Kyoko, obviously. And he closes the phone like he's getting ready to leave. My favorite part of this whole episode is when Yanagihara is like, oh, are you leaving? And he's like, yeah, I have a match tomorrow. Which, one, you were going to stay and watch this game regardless of if you had a match tomorrow. You just leaving is pretty sudden, right? Pretty sudden. I'm sure that Goto didn't want Kyoko coming here and making a scene, and girl probably would because she's toxic like that. So he's like, oh no, I have a match. I gotta go. And I think my favorite part of this whole episode is Yanagihara looks at him like, and he says, oh, and he grabs his tea and he says, don't make Kota cry too much. That is like some, like, you took the knife and took it under his rib and just went, because at first I was like, oh, is he facing Kota? Why doesn't Ray have a reaction to that? No, I don't think that's what he's talking about. I don't think Goto has a match against Kota. I think Yanagihara knows exactly who he's messing around with. He's been like, you're hanging out with Koto's daughter. And it's not my business. Again, that passive-aggressive, just little needling. He's like, it's not my business to say what you're doing or what you should be doing, but I know what you're doing. And he's like, don't make Kota cry. Don't break his daughter's heart. Oh, that moment where he just takes a sip and he's like, you're going to challenge me in this room? And the stare that Goto makes at him, it just focuses on his eyes because Goto ain't going to say nothing. Goto ain't going to say a damn thing because it's in front of Smith, it's in front of Issa, it's in front of Kaido, it's in front of Ray, it's in front of all these people. Goto is not going to make a scene and draw attention to the fact that, I mean, Ray already knows, but Ray clearly, as far as we know, hasn't told anybody else, which he hasn't. And Goto doesn't want to draw attention to it because Goto's a weak man. He doesn't want the world knowing about his affair. But Yanagihara knows. Yanagihara doesn't really care or think it's his business. And that just shows the difference between how Yanagihara handles it and how Ray handled it. Ray got mad on his sister's behalf and challenged Goto, which, understandable, makes perfect sense. Yanagihara doesn't have that same connection to Kyoko as Ray does, but so he just does this passive-aggressive little, well, don't make her dad cry. It's like, oh, that moment was just so damn good. And then we cut to them outside and we see exactly why he said that. And we see the torrential storm that is Kyoko. Yep. And so there's him and her, and he's just like, why do you always have this fierce stance like a demon? And she's like, well, fierce, are you saying I look like an ogre? And he's like, pretty much. He's like, well, good, you're already aware that you look like that. And she gets flustered, and she aims her fist at him, and he just palms it, like, girl, you're not serious, and you know you're not serious. But in that same moment that he grabs her, let's get this, that he grabs this, he puts his hand around it, right? Like he stops it. They're made for one another, honestly. In their insane toxicity, they're made for each other because he accepts her. He takes her. They're both fiery, right? They're both passionate, and he takes that passion from her. And I feel like in some ways Kyoko is attracted to him because she can get mad at him and throw fists, and he just accepts it and takes it, right? And for her, she kind of needs somebody that can handle her crazy, right? And he can. Good for him. But he doesn't turn her away. And instead, he lets her get next to him. And as he starts to walk away, right? So he starts to walk away, and you're like, okay, Goto, you're going to leave her alone. But then she comes up to him, and she puts her hand around his back and walks with him. Like, so she accepts. Like, I'm like, girl, again, I don't feel bad because when he turned and walked away, she could have just let it be and went home. But that's not what she wants. And he's a weak man. And the moment she puts her arm around him, he accepts it. I'm like, I don't feel bad for him either because he accepts it. Right? So then, and of course, Rei is just like, he senses that they're like, oh, what's wrong, Kiriyama? And he's like, why did I suddenly feel her presence? I'm like, well, that's because these two old men were talking about your sister without you knowing that they were talking about your sister. So as the move is going on, Rei talks about he hasn't seen his sister since March. And he thought about calling her after that. But he stopped when he reached the phone. What should we even talk about? And I am kind of proud of Rei because at this point, I don't think that there's much Rei can do to actively help her. I think Rei wants to, but relationships have to be a two-way street. They can't be one way. So you can care about somebody to the moon and back, but if they don't care back, then you're going to reach a breaking point. And I think Rei has reached that breaking point where he's like, I don't know how to help her. She needs to help herself first. He's like, I'll be here for her if she comes to me because I'm her brother, but I can't make her change and I can't fix her. She needs to do that herself, or she needs to come to some realization. And I'll be here to support her, but I can't do that for her. And I know that feeling because I've had family too that even recently, they just kind of dropped out of touch and I didn't feel connected to anymore. And it's kind of like you can make those attempts to get back with them and to try to resolve or build back that relationship. But at some point, it kind of does feel one-sided. And eventually you're like, am I putting in more work into this relationship than the other side is? And what does that say? And if you really want that relationship to work, then I guess you can keep trying and struggling. But when you see the other side isn't reciprocating, it's kind of like, do they want to be in this relationship anymore? And if not, then am I wasting my time and energy trying to fix something that right now can't be fixed? And that's a hard thing to ask. And that's different for any family, anywhere. It's not a universal fix-all, cure-all. So I respect Rei right now for being like, I'm in a good place and she's not come to me for help. So I'm assuming that no news is good news. I'm going to let her be. And if she needs me, she'll come to me. That's not a bad place to be. And I don't blame Rei for being that way. Even if she were close to me, the one standing next to her is. Yeah. It's like, even if she was close to me, she's with Goto right now, and I'm not gonna, he's like, I tried to get in that before, and that didn't work out great, so I'm not gonna try again. And he's like, and I feel like Yanagihara kind of knows what's going on. He kind of knows the situation maybe because he knows that Rei is with Kota as well. So he probably does know how messed up this all is. Because the next thing he says is sometimes it looks simple to unravel, but other times it looks messed up and tangled. It's just chaos. I feel like he's trying to, in his passive-aggressive, blunt but inadvertent way, tell Rei, being like, look, I know sometimes it seems like it's pretty straightforward, cut and dry, but humans are complicated and chaotic, and it's not easy to resolve things like this. So he's like, I kind of get it. He says it's chaos. So then we have the chapter called Kumakura, and we go to the final, the 7th game on the second day of the Meijin battle, the game that will decide the winner. So it's tied between the two of them. And here we are. So this is the game that ends in 17 moves, which is mind-boggling. So Souya has won 5 times, totaling 11 wins. So will he retain the title? So what that meant, okay, that makes more sense now, because they were tied. It's the 7th battle between Souya and Kumakura. So Souya has won 3 matches. Kumakura has won 3 as well. And this is the one to determine. And Souya ends up winning. So far, Souya has won 5 times. He's won 5 years in a row. He has won the Meijin tournament 5 times with 11 wins. So other than 3, he's pretty much, totaling 11 wins. So I don't know the math of it. You all probably explain in the comments below. But, so yeah, he's retained this title. And he's like, is he going to be able to keep it? Well, the answer is yes. And so Kumakura has faced him 4 years in a row. And he still doesn't get it. Oh. I feel like with Souya, part of Soya's deal is he kind of exemplifies with shogi that some of it is luck. And they're like, what do you think, Mr. Tsuji? And Tsuji is the pretty boy. Tsuji's the pretty boy that doesn't like Rei. We established him at the end of season 2, right? He is the pretty boy. And he's a 9th Dan, and he's the commentary hall. He very much, oh my gosh, he very much is the type of commentator I don't like. I watch a lot of livestock shows, which sounds very bizarre, I'm sure. If you've ever watched like the Westminster Dog Show, think of that, but with cows. That's the best way to do it. And most of them used to be just like you would see the animals being evaluated, and then at the end, the judge who evaluated them would get on the microphone and discuss their reasons. And I always really appreciate that. I do some judging myself as a hobby, and so I like hearing reasons and seeing why people make choices that they do, and I'm like, that's really fascinating. But as of late, to try to, like, I guess, get into the social media crowd and to make it seem more official, they've added, like, commentators. And sometimes the commentators are, like, renowned people in the field, you know, that have won competitions and they have, like, a name for themselves. And then others kind of remind me of Tsuji, where they're just kind of in the know. They know a lot of people, and people are like, oh, they'd be good for talking. And sometimes their commentary just annoys me. Because I'm like, what made you a professional expert? You know, and Tsuji kind of reminds me of that, too. I'm like, is Tsuji the expert that should be talking about Souya and whether or not he's finished or not? Because then we see that that is not the case. So it's like, okay, Tsuji. And they're all like, well, why did he do that? Why did he make this one move? Why not promote it and do... And Souya doesn't pick the obvious move that Smith or others predict. He makes the move that was needed to checkmate. And they're all trying to figure out, like, why did he make that move? And Yanagihara figures out the meaning before anybody else. He's like, oh. They're like, because, yeah, Tsuji's like, oh, you're saying that Kumakura's going to win. And he's like, oh, yes, absolutely. And that's when Yanagihara's like, no, it's over. He figured out, he's like, wait, this is the move. And the moment the glucose, like, little squares, like, kind of just fall is when Kumakura notices it as well. And he's like, I lost. I resign. And everybody's like, the match is over. He just lost the whole thing. He just gave up right here, right now. It's over. And that's it. Everybody's like, what? And everybody's like running and dashing and saying like, oh my God, everything's over. What's happening? And Yanagihara's like, he was checkmated at the 17th move. Like just that. Over. Like barely started the game. And I like how Rei and Nikaido try to play it out to see, like, well, what if we kept doing this and this? And it still ended up with the same result. That one move put him in position to checkmate, and there was nothing you could do about it. And you just see Soya's eyes in that moment. Souya is terrifying because he's so unsuspecting. He's so calm and collected, and you just don't see it coming. And Rei's like... Rei is so surprised that this happened. He's like, everything was in vain. At that moment, Kumakura knew there was nothing he could do. And I love that, you know, for Yanagihara, for being so, like passive-aggressive, but yet blunt and everything, for him to be like, Souya, brilliant. Like, recognizing credit where credit is due. Like, that was perfect. Mm-hmm. So, and then Kumakura's like, well, damn it, that's all I can say. I'm going to fight off everyone in the rank deciding competitions for next year, and train hard so I can come back and sit here again. And at the time, I was like, damn, he's taking this really well because he seems like a very intense person, and he lost, and it was a very quick loss, and it was just like all this buildup and then boom, done. And I was like, he's handling this really, really well. And then we find out that he kicked a hole in the wall when he was off camera. But again, it's that persona of, we're in a professional environment, we put on this face, we handle our stuff on the shogi board. But then I think that's why the chairman gets mad at him. He's like, well, you're supposed to handle it on the shogi board, not break a hole in the hotel wall that now we got to pay for. So, and I love that Issa and Smith are like, he's so cool. Yeah, he has that persona, that face to put on. He's a professional, right? And Ray's like, is it? He's like, what does he say there? Because Ray like looks over, he's like, is it confidence? Is it confidence that staring at square one and fighting through Class A, a den of demons, over and over again, swearing that he'll be sitting in the front of the champion next year too? Yeah, like, is it confidence? That's such a good question. Ray's like, how can these guys who are just at the top of their game like still remain confident that they're going to get back to that same square when they're facing these insane hurdles? He's like, is it just confidence, or what else is there that get them to that point? And Ray's like, if it's just confidence, which Ray lacks a lot of confidence, so he's like, can I get there if I do that? And it's like, yes, of course. But so then we get a little bit more into Kyoko. And she's going to, I like that they do Uncomb, which is Lancome, is like a skincare line. And they basically do, she's like, I've got toner, lotion, and the moisturizing cream. So I toss that in. And then it's the softest Goto ever looks, is looking at her, because she's getting this for his wife, who is a stone cold fox. No pun intended with her comatose state. But she's beautiful. And he's like, okay. And that's probably the best Goto's ever looked, is when he looks at her after she gets him the stuff. Because that's probably the softest that Kyoko's ever been. So she's been helping him get products for his wife. Okay? Helping him get products for the wife. And when he looks at her, he was like, yeah, sorry for the hassle, but I won't stop sneezing if I go into places like that. And I get that, because I had a professor in college she had easily had allergic reactions to perfumes and things like that. Like, it would give her headaches, it would make her sneeze. So she literally had a sign on her door being like, please don't wear perfume when you come in, or I'll get a migraine. And it was just like, and you just didn't do it because you wanted to respect her, right? You didn't wear perfumes if you were around her. So I get that. It's awfully nice of Goto to get his wife the cream and lotion and moisturizer, things like that. Maybe he doesn't have any other family that can do that for him. Perhaps. Maybe he doesn't want to admit to his family that he can't go into stores like that. Maybe that's against his pride and he doesn't want to be like that. Fine. Maybe he doesn't want to ask other shogi players if they would possibly, like, you could have asked Smith and he'd probably go in there. Maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he has too much pride as a man to do that. But because Kyoko's so willing, he'll let her do that for him. That's great. What a nice gesture. I'm not going to dissuade from that. That's really good. But then he tells her goodbye. And he's like, okay, bye. And Kyoko ain't just going to take that. She's not going to just do a favor for him without getting repaid, right? And I'm like, girl, again, you can be nice to him and just accept that he said thank you. You don't need a favor or physicality or affection in exchange for doing that favor, right? Because I'll be honest, if I were the wife in a coma, I'd be pissed at Kyoko. I'd be mad at Goto too, but I'd be especially pissed at Kyoko because she keeps on pushing. And I'm like, he's married. Leave him alone. Quit being a homewrecker. Quit it. And I could say that as someone who has had a crush and been in love, or thought that I was in love with people that had girlfriends. And you know what you do when they have a girlfriend? You leave them alone. You do. As much as it hurts, as much as it tears you apart knowing that they're happy with someone else that's not you, and it's heartbreaking and you cry over it and you lament over it, but then you pick yourself back up and go, well, I'm not a homewrecker, so I guess I'll go move on with my life. And it's hard, but you got to do it. And so I'm like, girl, Leave him alone. And we'll talk about him here in a second with it. And he's like, see you. Thanks again. And she asks if she can go with him. And he's like, the last thing I want to do is show up at a hospital with a 22-year-old girl in my arms as I'm giving beauty products to my comatose wife. That's the last thing I want to do. And again, Godo, he's a weak man. He doesn't want people to see that and get that impression of him. But then he lets her stay in his apartment. And he's like, I'll thank you properly next time. So, which means, no, you can't come with me. And I'd be like, Kyoko, get the hint. He doesn't want you there. Stop. Quit it. And so Godo goes to the hospital where his gorgeous wife is. And it shows her, I'm assuming she's in a coma. I'm assuming that she is. She looks drop dead gorgeous. Masako. And he sits there and he holds her hand. And I feel for Godo. I do. I understand that he's a man and the woman he loves is possibly in a state where she may never get out of that coma. If she's in a coma. We don't know. We assume. I feel for him. That sucks. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, he's weak because he doesn't like being lonely. And so he lets Kyoko come into his life. And it's like, on the one hand, you get it. But on the other hand, if I were his wife and I woke up out of that coma, then what are you going to do? Because it's like one of those things, it's like, at what point do you cut it off? Because if she comes out of that coma, are you going to drop Kyoko then and tell Kyoko, hey, my wife's back. Sorry. Now you've got to leave me alone because my smoking hot wife is back. I don't need you anymore. That's going to blow up. That's going to go horribly because you've built up all this stuff with Kyoko where she thinks she's needed. And then if you don't need her anymore, what's that going to do to her? And if she sticks around and gets in your face and the wife finds out about it, what's the wife going to think? It's going to make Godo feel like he not only cheated on his wife, but then you've pissed off both women. So what are you doing? And it's like, but he doesn't, but it's clear that he likes his wife and he doesn't want to divorce her. And plus, he's a guy that views himself on his principles and on his face and his persona of how he appears in public, that he has a certain pride and appearance to him. The last thing he wants to do is probably be known as the man that divorced his comatose wife because she was in a coma to go date a 22-year-old half his age. And so, yeah, you get it. But then I'm like, then you got to make a decision. You either need to set that boundary and say, Kyoko, if you can't leave me alone, then I'm going to leave you and ditch you and we're done. And I'll find someone else to get the lotion from a wife. Or you need to leave the wife and then make it a thing. But this riding the line of what is acceptable and it's just toxic. And it's not going to end well for any of the three people involved. And yeah, Kyoko shows up there with his cleaning, and she tricks him into letting him in. The irony is, and we'll talk about the end card here in a second, because it's maybe one of my favorite end cards in the whole series so far, is that when he pushes open the door, she runs in like a cat, right? And he's like, oh no, I was outwitted by a 22-year-old. I should have known. I'd have been like, no, go run her out to the taxi and then get in your home to put the dry cleaning up. You let a 22-year-old trick you, sir. Is that there are, in the end card, I'll show you all here in a second, or I guess I'll show you all here right now. This is the end card. It's one of my favorites of the whole series. I love the colors. I love the greens. I love the pinks. I love its kind of putrid looking and how saturated and coloristic. The colors are saturated and they're kind of putrid, kind of poisonous looking. Right? Get it? The mangaka is Marie Okazaki, who has done 2 main series, Supply as well as Passion Fruit, which both look very interesting. I'm curious. The art style is gorgeous. The art style, we'll talk about this moment here in a hot second, but the art style is gorgeous. The thing that's so fascinating is that there are lilies in here, and lilies are poisonous flowers. They are toxic, particularly toxic to cats. And so Kyoko, being a cat, going in there, and cats being a prominent animal in this show, the fact that lilies are poisonous to them and deadly to them just shows that this relationship between Goto and Kyoko is poisonous. It's toxic. And it's fascinating. Don't get me wrong. It's fascinating. But no party here is going to end well. It's just not going to end well. And you can kind of see the writing on the wall. And she's like, oh, well, you're just a weak man. That's why I take advantage of you. And I'm like, Goto, kick her out. And he even has lilies in his apartment, like in the vase, right? I'm like, Goto, grab her, shove her out the door, close your door and lock it. That's all you have to do. That is the responsible, adult, mature man thing to do. And tell her to go home. But he won't do it because he's lonely and he's weak. And so he ties her up because he doesn't want her to mess with. And this was the part that got me too, because I was starting to be like, okay, Goto doesn't want to throw her out because she'd probably throw a fit. And then he doesn't, again, Goto's appearance. He doesn't want people to know. And so he's like, well, if I just keep her here, she'll be quiet, whatever. And then, of course, Kyoko tries to make a move on him, which I'm like, girl, you are buying products for his comatose wife. Homewrecker, what are you doing? Stop it. And so then she tries to make a move on him, and so he ties her up so she can't make a move on him, and I'm like, okay, fine. Let it be. But he is just as weak and scared as she is. And he leans over to her, and he falls asleep on her side. He's just as weak as she is. He probably hasn't slept well in a long time. And his face is pale. She's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, you both are. She's like, now I can't get mad at you. Not after you show me this side of you. Bakas. The pair of them. They're made for each other. But I almost feel bad for them because you know this is not going to end well. And the only, as morbid as this is to say, the only way that Goto can possibly have this end in a relatively decent way is if his wife dies. That's morbid to say, but that's literally the only way. Because if his wife wakes up, I'd be pissed, right? I'd be like, oh, thank you for helping my husband, now leave. And Kyoko ain't gonna do that. If she does, that'd be the biggest character growth in the history of the show. But, you know, he's not gonna divorce his wife either for reasons. So it's like, unless his wife just dies and he'll be heartbroken, but then he'd be free to pursue that relationship with Kyoko. But then is he even going to do that? Because then is he going to even need, because right now he needs Kyoko to get the stuff for his wife. Even though he doesn't technically need her, he needs her. And she fulfills needs for him because of his weakness. And so even if she does die, is he going to love her? Or is he going to admit to her that he was just using her because of his wife's condition? Again, none of this is going to end well. Someone's going to die or 3 people are going to be heartbroken. So, it sucks. It all sucks. Speaking of sucks, the chairman is totally mad because Kumakura just kicked a hole in the wall. And Kumakura's like, oh shit. Or the chairman's like, oh shit. And he's like, that bastard. He's like, and so he's on the phone with Yanagihara being like, he kicked out of the wall. That Kuma. Yanagihara's like, what a man. Well, I figured he'd be pissed about losing. Imagine that. And chairman's like, we have to pay for that. He's going to pay for the damages. Don't you worry. The chairman's like, I got a business to run here. We can't be having this happen. I'm going to send him to the shogi events on a department store rooftop in the sweltering summer vacation. And Yanagihara just laughs. He's like, oh, Kuma. And then we have the train where Kuma's taking his shoes off. He's like, it must have been frustrating to have to start back at square one. And we see him kind of just like Shimada in the same pose, sleeping on the train. It couldn't have been anything other than frustrating. Holy hell. I've talked for a long time about this episode, but it was so damn good. So damn good. Yes. Yes. Chop chop. Great. Great time. Great time had by all. This was amazing, and I loved it. So, I'm super excited to see what's going to happen next. That's for damn sure. But what can we do? So, I'm super excited, y'all. I hope you all are as well, but I am very curious to hear what y'all have to say about this episode as well. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below, but season 2's off to a great start. This is just the second episode. So, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And I'll be back next week with episode 25 of March Comes In Like a Lion. Bye.